Bring on the rants.
Unscripted Ranting.
Welcome everyone to episode number 92 of the Average Ontario Anglers Fishing Podcast. Now this is a bonus episode. I thought I'd throw together some of our best clips and interesting fishing facts of season 2 in 2024. Some of these made me and Andrew laugh pretty hard, so I hope that you guys find them entertaining for the second time. We really look forward to season 3, where we're going to have some of the most educational content that we have ever pumped out. I'd like to take this moment quickly to tell everyone thank you very much for all the support we received in the last year. We really appreciate all of the downloads, all of the shares, and all of the reviews. So sit back and relax and enjoy me and Andrew's beautiful voices.
All right, so Jesse and I, we've talked before about different fears and stuff like that fishermen may have or that we have. It could be considered a challenge sometimes to get over a fear, so it kind of fits in with today's topic. But Jesse, if you had to name something that you are fearful of when fishing, what would it be? You and I share this fear.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Say it out loud.
There's only one thing that Jesse, the most manly person that I know myself, is afraid of.
He only has me as a friend, so that's just a true statement. It's the manliest person he knows is himself.
The only thing that'll truly make me scared is if I'm in the water, snapping turtles.
Yep. Doesn't everyone love snapping turtles?
They're super cool.
I do. I actually think they're amazing. So I did a bunch of research on them.
I will just add one thing though. Snapping turtles for me are like spiders. I'm cool with them as long as I know where they are.
Yes.
Okay.
If I'm in a boat and they're in the water, I have zero fear. Like I'm just excited to see one. If I'm in the water and they're in the water, I have a bit of fear. And if I'm on land and they're on land, I can walk faster than they can run. So that's all right. So snapping turtles, the average size that we can encounter them when they're fully grown is maybe like 12 inches long of the carapace, the shell is 12 inches long. Plus they have the tail and they have their head sticking out. On average, an adult weighs about 35 pounds or so. But do you know what the record size common snapping turtle? There's in North America, we have the alligator snapping turtle down in the States. We don't have any of those in Ontario. Thank goodness. They're huge. But we have the common snapping turtle, one of only 5 species in the world of snapping turtles. And we have them all over where we fish. Pretty much every single lake I've ever been in or pond, I can guarantee you has snapping turtles. So do you know what the record snapping turtle weight is?
Okay, so you said they average 35 pounds.
They average 35 pounds.
I'm going to double it and add 7.
That'd be 77 pounds. The record's 75 pounds.
Whoa! Nice.
75-pound snapper.
My double it
the
thing
shell
worked.
size. The shell size. Now, I've definitely seen ones that are bigger than a 12-inch shell, like lengthwise. I know even at the cottage growing up, we've seen a few, and they range between 16, 17. The biggest one I've seen, I swear, has got to be about this size. Longest measured one, apparently, that I could find online was 19 inches. Now, that's just the carapace. That's just the shell. Snapping turtles have the record for the longest tail any turtle has. The tails can be as long as their shell. The common snapping turtle also can, with its head and neck fully extended, that also is about the length of their shell. So if you have a 19-inch shell plus a 19-inch tail and a 19-inch neck fully extended, that's 57 inches. That's 4 foot 9 inches long.
Wow.
That's huge
scary.
turtle. Now, I remember at the cottage, I saw one, its head was about the size of a softball. Like, this is a huge snapper. But those are very rare, apparently, to get them into that size. But snapping turtles, they live about 40 years old or more. In the wild, it's sometimes around 30, but in captivity, they can live over 50. And the interesting thing is, the scientific name for the snapping turtle, which I won't even bother trying to say, it means tortoise snake. That's the direct translation. So tortoise because it's a turtle, snake because it has a very long tail. And the species of snapping turtle that we have, they say scientists claim it's been around for 90 million years. So this thing is legitimately a dinosaur. Now, something that you and I are always fearful of is, of all the things about the snapping turtle, like the spiky tail, that's cool, huge, like multiple inch long claws, like 4-inch claws and stuff. Those are cool. But what are we scared of?
The bite.
The mouth. Yeah, the snap. Now, I was curious to see, like, everyone knows it's a formidable thing. You don't want to get your hand in their mouth because we've always been told they'll snap off a finger, right?
Yeah.
Now, the bite force of a snapping turtle, common snapping turtle, is 210 newtons. Now, to put that in perspective, humans, we have a bite force of 1,100 newtons on our second molar. So that's our prime spot for the most bite force. The difference is, though, snapping turtles, though it might not sound like much, they have a sharp edged jaw. So that means that their jaw that you see just comes up to a fine edge. It's basically like scissors. Oh. So unlike us, where we have, our jaw and then there's teeth and then we have whatever else in the way when we're biting, their jaw is just straight, like fixed edge is part of their jaw, and they just snap that shut. So absolutely, they have taken off fingers off people before. That is a thing that will happen. But they don't just attack humans. That's not what they eat, obviously. But they will eat, they're omnivores. So they'll eat anything from different plants to fish, worms, bugs, birds, frogs, even other turtles. And it's been found that they will disembody the other turtles to eat them. So they're pretty aggressive that way. When they're in water, so this is funny because you and I both say that I don't want to be in the water with a snapping turtle. Yeah. Now, growing up, going camping, my dad, he'd see one and he would like dive in the water and swim after it. It's known that snapping turtles are actually very calm in the water. They get aggressive when they're out of the water.
Fair.
So I was thinking about speed. Like, how fast does a snapping turtle move around and stuff like that? When they're in water, they can swim 12 miles per hour or 19.3 kilometers per hour. That's how fast they can swim. That's pretty quick. That's very quick. So your canoe goes how fast, Jesse?
Miles? I don't know what it is in miles.
No, kilometers per hour.
Oh, kilometers. I can hit like 12, 13 kilometers an hour.
So a turtle can outpace you by like 6 kilometers an hour.
I want to race a turtle now because my canoe is actually named the fish turtle.
Yes. Now, what about on land? How fast can a common snapping turtle move on land? Now, not many people may know this, but snapping turtles can run. They're still not crazy fast. They are a turtle after all, but they can run at 2.4 miles per hour or 3.86 kilometers per hour. So running, they're not that fast, but I'll tell you what, when you're 6 feet away from them, they can move pretty quick.
Yeah,
a lot quicker than you would expect them to, which then becomes terrifying. Now, we already talked about the snapping turtle. This is the most fascinating fact for me about these things. We know that they have the world record for the longest tail of any turtle. They have another world record. They're the best at jumping. The best jumping turtles. So other turtles, they can jump maybe 4 inches. A snapping turtle, guess how high in relation to its body size? How high do you think it can jump? Like as a human, I could jump personally maybe 1/3 of my height. Or let's say 1/2 of my height I could jump over.
I'm going to say 100% of its body height it can jump.
They can jump higher than its body length.
What?
So yeah, if you have like a 2-foot turtle, it can jump over 2 feet in the air. How terrifying is that?
Can it bite you as it jumps?
Yes, it can.
Okay, so that's even more terrifying.
And you and I have actually seen a turtle jump before. It was sitting up on a log and we were motoring up to it, and all of a sudden you had yelled at it. And instead of what we normally saw was this turtle would kind of flop over off this log it's sitting on, going into the water. This thing jumped, did a 180 in the air, and then landed back on the log and then started like flipping as it fell into the water. But it jumps and like spins around on you. So even though it can only run so fast, if you're going to attempt to try and pick this up, let's say you see a big snapper trying to cross the road and you want to save it, do not be surprised if this thing jumps 2 feet in the air, whips around, tries to bite you as you're approaching behind it. That's what these things can do.
Now I'm more scared.
So the last question I have then is, how do you move a snapping turtle? Let's say there is one crossing the road and you want to get it to safety. What is the best, safest way to move the snapping turtle? What would you do, Jesse?
I have picked them up a few times. I actually picked one up that was fair size. Oftentimes you see people pick them up by the shell, but because their neck is really long, I assume that if you hold it too close up, it could probably just reach back and bite you.
If you grab the left and right hand side of the shells, they can get you.
Yeah. I've seen people pick them up by the tail, but that seems possibly bad for the turtle, just like holding it up by its full weight on its tail. I think the best way to move a snapping turtle is literally not to.
So there are a couple ways to do it. There are some kind of expert level handling methods to literally pick up a turtle. It's best not with the common snapping turtle. You'll see down in the States with the alligator snapping turtle, they'll wrap one hand up right behind the head, hold onto that shell and hold right above their tail in the shell, lift that thing up, and the thing cannot bite them. Not the case with our common snapping turtle. When you try and get your hand up over the top of that shell, there's a very good chance they can still get their head around and bite you. You can grab just kind of above the base of the tail and kind of lift up on the backside and maybe drag it across the road that way. You don't want to grab onto the tail, like you said. But again, you're still putting yourself in danger because by the time you're going trying to grab the thing by the tail and it feels you touch it, it can jump around and bite you. So they say the best method to do it is, let's say, most commonly for doing this is because it's on the road. You've pulled over in your car. So take out one of your longest car mats that you have. Set it on the ground in front of the turtle. Take a long stick and kind of prod it or poke it or move it onto the car mat. And then you can grab the edge of that car mat and drag it across the road and just kind of dump it off at the side. That way you don't actually have to touch the turtle. And you should be far enough away that it's not going to be able to bite you. Still use caution. If you are unsure of how to move it, just leave it. If you are comfortable doing so, then save the turtles.
And then I guarantee some guy will be like, "It works great, guys." He puts up his thumb, but there's half a thumb there. That was very interesting. I find snapping turtles fascinating. Yeah. I just don't like the possibility of getting any dangling body parts bit off when I'm swimming. But hey, they're cool. These may be interesting, but I'm pretty sure, I'm like 99.9% sure that everything I'm about to tell you is completely illegal to do in Ontario. So if you're listening to this in your car as you're driving, turn it down if you see a cop drive by. This is how sketchy it is. So I thought it would be an interesting thing because I was talking to a guy at work and he's like, do you ice fish? And I was like, yes, I do ice fish. And he's like, that just seems like the stupidest way to catch a fish. And I explained to him, I'm like, actually, it's not. It's actually the biggest screw you to nature because you're like, nature's like, I'll protect the fish with ice. And you're like, haha, nope. And you drill a hole and you catch it anyway. So I thought that was funny, but it got me thinking about the stupidest ways to catch fish. And again, these are all illegal, so don't try any of these. So the first one, it's probably one that you've heard of before. And I'm going to ask you, Andrew, if you've heard of any of these as we go through. And I know you have, so we've kind of talked about these over the years. So the first one is noodling. Now, noodling is not illegal, but it is illegal in Ontario, so don't try this. But what is noodling, Andrew?
Noodling is, it's kind of like when you're slurping off that bowl of ramen and you got that last noodle and you're like, that's what you're doing, but to catfish. And your arm is the noodle.
That's a good...
You're shoving it into their face and trying to pull them out by hand.
So I thought it was funny. It said noodling involves deliberately getting eaten by a fish. Not your whole body, but generally your hand or maybe your arm. So basically what noodling is you stick your arm down a catfish's mouth and then you drag it out of the water. Now that may sound either terrifying or easy. And I'll tell you, it's one of those things. That's for sure. It's terrifying. So what they do is you would put your hand down along the bank and there'd be like these undercut banks where these big catfish would be sitting during the day. A lot of these catfish are nocturnal, so they're mostly active at night. And during the day, they kind of hole up in these holes or underneath logs or under, some kind of cover. So you'd feel around with your hand till you feel its mouth, and then you jam your hand down its mouth and grab on and pull the fish up. That may sound not too bad, but when you think about the fact that some of these catfish can weigh upwards of 75 pounds, have you ever tried fighting a decent sized catfish? Like even a 10-pound channel catfish fights like heck.
Oh, absolutely. Like
they pull, they have good pull and they're strong.
Catfish are one of the strongest swimming fish I think you could encounter in fresh water pretty much.
Yeah. So imagine doing that, but grabbing a 75-pound catfish and trying to literally pull it up out of the water. And it's just grabbing your arm and trying to swim the opposite direction.
What terrifies me about that is, you remember River Monsters? I love that show, first of all.
Yeah.
I'm Jeremy Wade, extreme angler and biologist. But he was talking about the whales catfish, which are even bigger. But he was saying that a catfish or a fish, just 1/3 of your body weight will overpower you in the water.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking like if you weigh, let's say 150 pounds and you go and try and noodle a 70-pound catfish, that's more than a third of your body weight. And he can easily drag you down and overpower you in the water. So
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah,
So
noodling large catfish is not for me.
yeah, thank goodness it's illegal. Now, we don't have catfish that big in Ontario, but there are some sizable sized channel catfishes. Now, you may think, how did this start? Why did people start doing this? Was it just something dumb? Well, actually, the Native Americans were noodling catfish long before people that you see on TikTok started doing it just for likes and views. But it was actually picked up by the settlers and became folk tradition throughout the South, all along the Mississippi River, and it's still incredibly popular in some places. But as a disclaimer, it is illegal in many states and it is illegal in Ontario, so don't try that. So the next one is called trout tickling. Now, Andrew actually mentioned this a few podcasts ago. Now, this is actually interesting because I was having a conversation with an older man that grew up in Germany that I know. He's probably 85 years old, and he was telling me all about trout tickling because back in the day, it was completely legal to do. I explained to him after he told me what it was that, it was illegal to do now in Ontario, especially, and he was shocked, but, old timers. But anyway, so trout tickling it sounds super easy, but it's super difficult. There's lots of stealth involved. So you basically have to, almost like a ninja, stalk up to this trout. And we know trout in shallow water, they can see pretty good above the water still at certain angles. They can feel vibration. They can see movement. So you basically have to crawl up to this thing, super stealth, super natural. And you stick your hand in the water super slowly. It's not like where you just shove your hand down and start tickling. You're like, no, nothing like that. You got to slowly get your hand underneath this trout on the belly. Now, what happens is you actually slowly put your hand up on its belly and you start tickling it, sort of like you start, rubbing your fingers across the belly of the trout. Now, if you do this correctly, it sounds like, oh, that would be pretty easy. It's not that I've tried it, but I hear it's pretty difficult. But if you do this correctly and with enough stealth and finesse, the fish actually just, for some reason, it just gets like, how do they say it? It goes into a trance almost. It's almost like when you shine a light into a frog's eyes when you catch it and it just kind of, sits there and does nothing. So when you tickle the belly of a trout, it actually, for some reason, just becomes just still. And then that gives you the ability just to grab it. And what they usually do is they don't grab it, but they'll actually put their hand under it and just throw it up onto the bank. And then they can pounce on it after before it flops back in the water. Now, is this something you think you could do, Andrew? I think if it came down to it, I could do it.
I think so too. There have been times I've, gotten especially with salmon in the creek. I mean, how many times have we got our ankles bashed by a Chinook?
Yeah.
It's funny you mentioned that because I was talking to an older gentleman I work with. He's from England and he was saying, he's just telling a story about how I used to do trout tickling. And I was like, what is that? Because I didn't know.
Yeah.
And so, a couple weeks ago, he was telling me, he's like, yeah, you go up and just like he said, tickle them underneath. And then as soon as they'd calm down, you just like throw them onto the bank. And it's like, what did you do with all these trout? He's like, yeah, we just threw them at each other.
Wow. That's why it's illegal.
Like, being schoolboys back in ye old England.
Actually, funny enough, it says in this article, the unusual technique used to be especially popular in Britain. So in Europe and in Britain, in that area. And in fact, even Shakespeare mentioned it back in the day. So it's something that was very popular back in the day. And I think that the reason why it was, as well as noodling, is you don't need any equipment. Say you're hungry, you're like, let's catch fish for dinner. Don't have a rod and a reel, don't have any lures, nothing like that, no bait. All you need is your hand. You can go down and either jam it down a fish's mouth, throw it up on the bank, wrestle it through the water, or you can tickle it, like, so...
All I picture is like Macbeth, be like, to tickle or not to tickle?
That is the question. And then a conservation officer walks up, is like, don't do that. So anyway, that's two of them. Now, this third one is very niche. So it's actually called flounder trampling. Yes, it's exactly what it sounds like. So trampling a flounder is another weird technique from Europe as well. And it was most popular in Scotland, which actually has a flounder trampling competition, or at least it did back in the day. It had the World Flounder Trampling Championships. So this is something that actually happens. Now, to do this properly, I guess, is you wade through the shallow, muddy water until you see a flounder. Now, if you know anything about flounder, describe a flounder, Andrew, for us.
Flat, both eyes on top of its head. You ever seen SpongeBob where it has that flounder? What's his name? Something flounder. And Mrs. Puff's boarding school, it just turns sideways and disappears.
Flats. Yeah.
Flats. Yeah. So there's they're just like a halibut, but small.
Yeah, so when you see them on the bottom, they're just flat on the bottom, two eyes facing up, and they just sit on the bottom. Oftentimes they get covered in some sand and stuff to try to camouflage themselves.
And they're like brown or olive green a lot of the time, so they blend in really well with the bottom.
So when you see these, you're wading through shallow water until you see a flounder, and then you stand on it. And that's it.
A flounder? Hey diddly ho neighbor.
The flounder, I guess it says trampling. You're not like really stomping on it because you have to have some stealth. I guess you just slowly put your foot on and step on it. Now, is this easy? Sounds pretty easy. The main reason that it generally isn't done anymore is because it's pretty cruel to fish. So obviously, like if you're going to keep a fish to eat, or if you have a sport with fish, you do your best to treat the animal with respect. Obviously, even if you're killing it, kill it respectfully. But trampling on a flounder, pretty cruel just to step on it, and then maybe you don't step on it to kill it and it gets injured, and it's not a good look for whoever is trampling flounder. So it's basically illegal in most places, so don't try this either. Not that we have flounder, but don't try to do like salmon trampling. That's bad. Don't do that. Another cool one, well, it's not even cool. This is actually super cheating. This is like cheating times 10. So one way that some people catch fish is by using animals. I'm sure you've heard of this. Humans aren't naturally good at catching fish. Like we figured out ways to do it, obviously. Like we have rods and reels and a million different lures and sharp hooks and everything, invisible line. But what creatures are the best at catching fish, Andrew?
Birds or bears?
Birds 100%. Some birds were specifically designed to be the best predator for fish, and they're just so good at doing it. So what happens is, and this oftentimes happens in Asian countries, is they'll actually basically tie up a cormorant, these birds that can literally swallow like a 3-pound bass whole, right? And they're really good at catching fish. So what these people in Asia figured out is they'll tie a rope around this bird's neck, a really long rope, and they'll let the bird dive into the water and catch a fish. Now, this rope is just tight enough around its throat that the fish cannot go down the throat. So as the bird's trying to swallow a fish, it gets stuck in the throat. It can't swallow it. So they have the rope pretty tight. So what happens is then they pull the rope in and they grab the fish out of the cormorant's mouth, boop, pull it out, chuck it in their boat. They keep the fish. They throw the cormorant back in the water and it catches another fish. And I've actually seen pictures where they have not just one, but they'll have multiple cormorants all working, catching all the fish in the area. So that obviously is illegal in so many ways. So don't try that. Although that would be a very effective way to catch fish in, I guess, like the zombie apocalypse, if that ever happens, but I wouldn't do that. So anyway, I thought that was pretty funny because I did see some posts on YouTube or something where they showed these people doing that. And I was like, that's ridiculous.
Wow.
But, I mean, it's smart, but pretty sketchy. Now this one, I'm pretty sure that you haven't heard, Andrew. I'm pretty sure none of our listeners have heard of this because when I saw this, I was like, that's crazy. I wouldn't even think that anyone would use this animal to help them catch fish. It's by using a horse. Now, what they call it is horseback trolling. So basically, imagine the ocean when it's low tide. Okay, there's not a lot of water. You have all these like big pools full of fish that get trapped in there. So what they do is they'll have two horses and a huge net between them. And two people will ride the horses slowly through these pools, just collecting all the fish with their nets. And they can actually cover like large amounts of area as opposed to going in there with nets or throwing in nets. So they use horses to do it. And the horses, they love it because they're just running through water anyway. So it's like win-win. You catch fish and the horses have fun too. So, so it's still done. And they actually use it too to catch shrimp, which aren't fish, but similar. So it's actually a tradition in many places. But again, in Ontario, don't get on a horse with your buddy and drag nets around the mouth of the river mouth to catch salmon or steelhead or anything like that. Because again, that is illegal. But I would love to see the ticket. I'd love to see what the conservation officer writes on the ticket. It's like, what's the charge? Well, it's called horseback trolling.
The worst part is conservation officers can impound your vehicle, right? Your boat, your vessel, even your car. And so Imagine them just like impounding the horse. I figured I'd make it up to everyone and have a very special installment again from the Freshwater Fisherman's Bible. By Vlad Ivanov.
It's been a while, man. It's been a while.
Has to be done. So we're going to talk about walleye today. And specifically, we're going to talk about Vlad Ivanov's opinion on walleye.
What is that book came out in 1964, if I recall?
That came out in, 1960. Well, copyright in 1964.
Wow.
So, walleye. People call them pickerel. We're going to get into that in a minute. But first off, he makes a very bold statement I just want to address right off the hop. He says that walleye are often easier to catch than trout, bass, pike, or muskie. Yes, they're easy to catch than muskie. Easier than bass, easier than pike, like the dumbest fish out there. I don't know. But again, this was made back in the 60s when, there was a whole bunch of walleye around in even the pressured lakes. Now, he talks about different names. Have you ever heard any other names for walleye, Jesse?
A lot of people call them pickerel, like you said.
So back then, here are some examples of names. The pike perch, yellow pike, jack salmon, golden pike, yellow pickerel, Susquehanna salmon, opal eye, pickerel, and door. And the last pickerel and door, those were from Canada, he says. There's also a subspecies of walleye known as the blue pike, blue walleye, and blue pickerel, which, again, is just a blue walleye, which I don't know if it's a true subspecies or if it's just like a weird gene defect in their pigments or something like that, or what they eat. But yeah, so he says that you don't need any special tackle to catch walleye. And I'm sure that all the walleye guys are just like in full agreement with that. Absolutely, you don't need any special tackle. He says you can use almost any bait casting, spinning, or spin casting outfit that you have. And light tackle provides the most sport.
Okay, now, I agree with most of that so far.
Yep. Now, again, we kind of joke around with Vlad, but he makes a lot of good points. I like to pick out the points that are funniest. So don't judge Vlad on only what I'm telling you. Go out, buy the book, and read it yourself. He talked about the most effective lures for walleyes. The most effective lure for walleye. What do you think it is, Jesse?
A twister tail jig or a bucktail jig.
That's what I would have said.
Yeah.
That's not what he said. He says a spinner, such as the June bug type, with a double hook behind it, covered with a minnow, worms, or lamprey eel.
What?
Yeah. Now, these spinners, I want to make now when I say spinner, what do you think of?
I think like a mep spinner.
Wrong again. So he says they also take various types of spoons and weighted spinners. Now, a comet or an aglia or stuff, that's a weighted spinner. So he's talking about those old, like inline with a spinner blade and a couple beads and then like the hooks, like what I would call a worm harness with like a spinner in front.
Yeah.
So that's what he's talking about. It's like, I could see that being the classic bait. And back then, I'm sure that's what was most commonly used. Then he says, and in recent years, some fine catches have been made on the lead head jigs.
It's like, this was brand new technology back then. A ball of lead on a hook.
Yeah. So he talks about how for live bait, a lively minnow or small fish on a hook will often catch them. Another good bait is a soft-shelled crayfish. I remember seeing an old episode of the Reno Viola actually using soft-shelled crayfish, like for smallmouth bass on one. Yeah. I think it was Lake Simcoe or Lake Ontario or something like that. And for anyone who doesn't know, soft-shelled crayfish is not another subspecies of crayfish. It's literally any crayfish. It just molted, so its shell isn't hard yet. It hasn't hardened up after it cracked out of its last one. Now, speaking of timing, I just want to read this paragraph because he talks about the best time to catch walleye. So in the spring and late fall, you can often catch walleyes most of the day. But during the summer months, the early morning, late afternoon, and evening, and night hours are best.
So all day long.
Almost all day. In fact, walleyes do a lot of feeding at night from spring to fall, and the rest of the year too. And you stand a good chance of catching them in the dark. During the summer months, if you must fish during the day, choose the cloudy, rainy days, or fish early in the morning, at dusk, and during the night. So basically, he's making these things sound like they're the most plentiful fish that will bite anything, and you can catch them all the time. I wish that were true, Vlad.
60 years ago, that was probably, a little more accurate,
Yeah.
It's like, how many times has your dad, like my dad used to tell me stories of like these lakes that we fish now, and they were literally choked with fish, and like not just any fish. Like you look at the pictures, they're legitimate 5-6 pound largemouth, and not just one or two. It's like a whole stringer of them, and it's like, oh yeah, and they were just fishing like basic lures. They're like, oh, I caught all these on a jitterbug. It's like, okay, so it was easy.
He talks about like where they can be found. Now, this stuff I fully agree with. It just goes to show that fish mentality and what they look for in their life doesn't really change. It might change on a lake as to where it is just because, let's say, the water temperatures have changed over the years, or the seasons are coming earlier or later. So that might make changes. But the fish themselves are looking for the same thing. So he says, look for walleyes below dams, falls, rapids, or riffles, around rocks, boulders, in the quieter pools and eddies. So that's in rivers. In lakes, fish around rocky points, rock or gravel bars, weedy bays, and deep water bordering rocky shores. The mouths of streams or rivers entering a lake are also good locations. To the untrained ear, that sounds like every part of the lake anyways. It's like deep water, rocks, not rocks, weeds. That's the kind of stuff we look for still to this day. But then he's talking about, again, like locating where walleye are. He says a good way to locate them is by slow trolling. You can do so with a June bug spinner and a minnow or worms in the hook. Lamprey eels are very good on a hook, also in rivers where this bait is found. Yeah, don't use invasive species as bait, please. He talks about using a jig, which again, for us is like the quintessential thing. Like we grew up looking at people using ball head jig with a twister tail, right? So he's talking about using that in a stream. He says the jig may have to be cast upstream and across to get down deep enough, and then is allowed to swing from the fast current into the slower spots. Now this is critical here, Jesse. I want you to pay attention to when to expect the bite, okay?
Okay.
The strike usually comes as the jig reaches the hole or pocket where the walleye is waiting. It won't come above that pocket where the walleye is waiting. It'll come once it reaches where the walleye is waiting. Keep that in mind. That's a pro tip right there.
So if you cast your bait where the walleye is not waiting, you will not catch a fish. Just as a heads up.
You're a quick learner.
Yeah, I know.
He'd be proud of you.
If I was fishing in 1960, I'd be like Bob Zumi.
I had to laugh when he was talking about how to cook walleye. If I had said, name like 2 ways to prepare walleye, what would you say?
Beer batter?
Yep, classic.
Yeah, or just like fried with salt and pepper, I guess.
Yeah, fried, or maybe like a baked walleye or something, like an almond crust or something, like delicious. He's like, he talks about the meat. They have a firm, sweet, tasty flesh, which can be fried, baked, broiled, or boiled. Love that boiled walleye.
Every single angler, I guarantee, has cursed, has ranted about, has complained about, has probably almost died from. And what is that thing, Andrew? I'll give you 2 guesses.
Jet skiers.
That's fair, because they are similar, but no.
large wakes and stuff like that?
Nope. We're going to talk about one of the world's deadliest animals.
Mosquitoes.
Yes. Mosquitoes. Yeah. Mosquitoes are annoying. I hate them so much. I know they have a purpose for some reason, not sure what, but that purpose is to annoy me. But anyway, I have some interesting fishing facts about mosquitoes, which again are terrible. But these are some pretty interesting facts. You might know some of these, but you probably didn't know all of them, because when I was doing this, I actually got some information from about 5 different websites, including a bunch of government websites as well, from all around North America. And a lot of these are very interesting. So listen up. A mosquito's wings beat 300 to 600 times per second.
Per second?
Per second. That's why they make that annoying, like, because their wings are just flopping.
It can't be that much.
It's a lot. So
wow.
How fast is that compared to a hummingbird? Faster or slower?
Way faster.
Apparently, mosquitoes' wings beat from 300 to 600 times per second, and a hummingbird is 80. That's crazy. So like, we've had a few opportunities to see hummingbirds pretty close. I was at my aunt's cottage a few years ago, and they have a hummingbird feeder right in front of their window, and you'll see them come in, and like, they're so loud. Of course, the wings are a lot larger, but that's crazy. But now every time you see or hear those stupid mosquitoes when you're in the tent, or you hear them and they're just like around your ears, like, and that's annoying noise, you know that their wings are beating so fast it's not even possible. It's crazy. Now, here's an interesting fact. Did you know that male mosquitoes find female mosquitoes by listening to the sound of their wings beating? The males can actually identify the correct species. There are 3,000 species of mosquitoes. So they can identify the exact species by the pitch of their female's wings. Wouldn't that be interesting if that's how humans founded mates? You're looking, all you do is you listen, and we're not listening for wings because humans don't have wings, but you hear them walking.
Listen for some high heels clicking across the floor.
Hey, that's exactly the woman I want. Thank goodness we're not mosquitoes. So an adult mosquito can consume about 5 millionths of a liter of blood in a single meal. Now, it sounds like nothing. 5 millionths of a liter of blood. That's like, what, half of a drop? Not even? Well, to compare that, if you're wondering, studies have revealed that mosquitoes are able to drink 3 times their own body weight in blood. So imagine, Andrew, if you had to drink 3 times your body weight in some kind of liquid, how much would that be?
That's 600 pounds of, well, more than that. It's more than 600 pounds of whatever.
Isn't that crazy? All right, here's another cool fact. Mosquitoes can fly at 1.6 to 2.4 kilometers per hour. So if you can walk at any speed, you should be able to outwalk a mosquito. So if you're getting eaten alive, just walk away. Now, unfortunately, they're coming from all angles.
Right into another cloud.
So you're going to walk into more mosquitoes, but that's okay. Now, you may have wondered, how do mosquitoes find me? Every single time I'm out, the mosquitoes just find me and I don't know how. Well, this is how they find you. A mosquito can smell carbon dioxide you exhale from up to 80 feet away. Carbon dioxide it's the main way that they find you, and they find other things that they might want to eat. They're not only, attacking humans here. They also attack other things. But how do they do that? Well, they have a special organ called the maxillary pulp, and it helps them smell CO2 released from when we breathe. So we may think, oh, I'm going to run away from the mosquitoes because they can't chase me because they're slow. Unfortunately, when you're running, the CO2 increases, and then they'll be able to smell you from 80 feet away. Therefore, the cloud of mosquitoes that you ran away from instantly becomes larger. Basically, you're doomed no matter what. I thought this was interesting. They did a bunch of researchers did a study, and it says, in the interest of science. This is not. This is more of in the interest of a horror movie. Arctic researchers, like we know down here, the mosquitoes are bad, but up there in the Arctic, in the summer, the mosquitoes are horrendously bad, like way worse than down here. The mosquitoes are different up there. They're like steroid mosquitoes. But anyway, they did this test, and I don't know who agreed to do this because this would be terrifying. They uncovered their chests, arms, and legs, and then they counted how many mosquito bites each person got per minute. Now, how terrifying is this? In 1 minute, as many as 9,000 mosquito bites. 9,000 mosquito bites per minute just attacking. Like your whole body would be covered. There wouldn't be a square inch of your body just not with a mosquito on it. And it said at this rate, an unprotected human would lose half of his or her blood supply in approximately 2 hours. So tip, if you're in the Arctic and you happen to be nude, no questions, no judgment, people, but if you are nude and you're running away from this cloud of mosquitoes and you're getting all these mosquitoes on you, you will die in 2 hours because they will suck half the blood out of you. Terrifying.
All I can think of now is that has to be the next like more extreme version of like Naked and Afraid.
Yes.
Where they're in like really like northern, like North Territories of Canada, and they have like during peak mosquito season.
Terrible.
They're like, you get 0 bug spray. Like, ah.
Now, you may ask me, Jesse, why would I be naked in the wilderness? Well, this next tip, or this next fact, will tell you maybe why. Multiple studies have demonstrated that beer consumption can make humans more attractive to mosquitoes. One small study of 43 volunteers funded by the French National Research Agency showed that mosquitoes landed on people significantly more after they drank beer. So that's some food for thought. So whenever you're on the campfire...
I wonder if that's the carbonation in the beer would be like on your breath more.
I don't know. Whatever it is, those mosquitoes, they love it. So if you're literally drinking tons of beer, just expect to get more mosquito bites. Now, there are a lot of other mosquito bite information, but I'm going to save that for Mosquito Facts Part 2. But before we do that, we actually have a very cool segment that we like to call
Story Time.
And to handle that, we have Andrew, and I have no idea what he's going to do. This better be a good story.
Well, I think Jesse will approve of this story because he had a hand in writing it. In fact, he wrote this whole story time because I have in my hands a letter from back in the day. I still have the odd letter kicking around of when Jesse and I, like Jesse alluded to in the introduction, we've been fishing together for decades. We've been friends since we were younger kids, and we used to call each other on the phone and talk about the Bass Pro Shops catalog, and we would write letters, sometimes on a weekly basis, just updating each other on what other fishing stuff we were interested in. Now, I wanted to kind of read over, I picked a couple different letters. So we'll see what time we have. But
this is going to be embarrassing.
I was laughing out loud when I read these. So this is kind of giving you an insight of how our friendship started and kind of like grew over the years. Jesse's much older now. I'm much older now. But I'm sure you get a kick out of this. 2, Andrew and Jeremy. For those who don't know, Jeremy's my brother. Hey guys, what's going on, eh? Just thought I'd write you a page before I go to bed. I haven't sent you a letter since late fall or later. Sorry. I always write them, but lose them in my landfill. I mean room. Haha. It's April 1st. Well, in 30 minutes it'll be anyway. I can't believe March is over already. I went fishing yesterday and today down at the creek. Sadly, because of this unseasonably warm weather, the majority of the steelhead run is long upriver beyond the out of bounds. I only saw 3 steelhead today, and I fished probably a 3 kilometers of prime fish-holding river. Yesterday, I brought my float rod and my ultralight for spinners. I fished a few really nice pools, float fishing with 3-inch white Berkeley trout worms. They actually work. I caught nothing, but did hook a decent rainbow, but we failed to connect and it was over as soon as it started. I switched to my ultralight, my favorite combo ever, and tossed a size 6 silver Panther Martin spinner the rest of the day. Down towards the lake, there's this nice spot I call the trench because it's shallow, then dips down real deep. On my first cast, my spinner swung just above the trench, and a fat, foot-long brown swam up and nailed it. She dove under some logs, but stood no chance against my Pro Joe ultralight fish-fighting abilities. She was in good condition, and silver, which means fresh from the lake. Anyway, speaking of ultralight fishing, I love it! Remember that pair of steelhead I took last spring on my ultralight and 4-pound mono? That was sweet! The bigger one was 26 inches and like a thick 5.5 pounds. It's too much fun! Today I fished the same stretch of water, but left my float rod at home. In the same spot as yesterday, I nailed another fat brown on the first cast, but she threw the hook. I continued fishing, and at the end of the day, landed a 10-inch and a 7-inch brown and a similar-sized rainbow. Nothing much, but better than nothing. I don't think I'll catch too many steelhead this year. I'll be happy with 1 2-footer. The post-spawn bows are almost too easy to catch, as they are actively eating on their way back to the lake. The only problem is they all come down at different times, so are hard to find. Dang. Anyway, I can't wait to fish Lake D again. I have a spinner in mind that'll slay. A size 15 Panther Martin, which is around a size 4 Aglia. They run deeper than Meps, and that's why I love them. I started drinking my coffee black today. 3 cups so far. I don't know if it'll last. It didn't last time I tried. I've actually been playing the acoustic a lot last week. Haven't touched my electric. I learned a Bob Dylan song, Blowin' in the Wind, today. It's a classic and very easy. Good song to know. And then, it talks about random things. But, at the end, he says, anyway, my computer time is up, so TTYL. From burger flippin', brown catchin', bass buying, fender strumming, ultralight king. Me. And I have to say, at the very bottom, Jesse was famous for these little cartoons and stuff. So he drew a steelhead, and the steelhead has a speech bubble, and it says, sorry, Jesse, I'm too far up the creek to catch. Blame global warming. Dang Al Gore.
Oh, good times, man. That was a long time ago.
Was.
Oh my goodness.
If you had time, Jesse, there is one more which goes over. I won't read the whole thing, but you give 4 different tips on how to deal with people when they come up to you and talk to you while fishing. So this is from a separate letter, because at this time, my brother and I had never fished like creeks down, like the tribs coming off of Lake Ontario and whatnot. And Jesse grew up fishing them. So he's telling us stories of like random people coming up and talking to him down by the creek, which still happens to this day. He says, people ask stupid questions. So they say, what are you doing, fishing? I say, moose hunting, obviously. This is also a way to tell how smart this person is too. Really? I didn't know moose were in these parts. You better believe it. Then you look at them and gasp, shriek the color of their top. Green! Moose hate green! They've been known to trample people down wearing green. Then they walk away or run. For effect, make moose-like sounds. If that doesn't work, here are 4 simple methods I've come up with to avoid people. Number 1. Well, sir, did you know there's a $5,000 reward for any information about that guy who disappeared? I heard he drowned around these parts. I bet they'll give me $10,000 if I actually snag him out. Then start describing what you think the body would look like, all bloated and stuff. You get double points if they barf. Number 2.
Legit.
If they start walking toward you through some tall grass, yell, "Stop! I just crapped in there somewhere. I wouldn't want you to step in it." I've said that unironically. Number 3. As they walk towards you or ask you a stupid question, start yelling at them in German or French or something. Then let out a long girlish scream and bolt toward them, waving your arms around. They run. Number 4. Fish naked. Unfortunately, this only works if you're a guy. I can just see it now. "Hey, baby, let me show you how to cast again." If none of these work, then I don't know what will. So, if any of you are wondering why Jesse and I are such close friends, it's because that was a sense of humor that was absolutely hilarious to us. And Jesse was like the epitome of coming up with random crap like that.
Yep.
So that's why we've been close friends ever since.
And people wonder and ask us many times why we started a podcast. It's because we literally talk about this kind of weird stuff all the time. So we figured we just record it. And apparently thousands of people like to listen and enjoy this podcast every single week. So if you're listening to this, thank you very much. We have a story about actually getting capsized in a boat by a monster. So we were in Andrew's portage canoe back in the day. And we decided the bright idea was the salmon were all staging in the harbors. And we said, it's a calm day. Let's go out. The water's flat. So we're trolling J13 Rapids behind the boat. I smoke a good one. The thing's literally pulling the boat around. Like you could tighten the drag up and the Chinook would literally turn the boat. And it was just like Jaws. It was just like...
You call it the salmon sleigh ride.
Salmon sleigh ride. So we're fighting this thing right beside the boat. It was right beside. I was just about to grab the thing. And Andrew and me both kind of leaned over at the same time, and we just the boat flipped right over. So here we are. The canoe flipped over. Andrew's trying to grab my gear. Everything's kind of floating in the water. I have my hands on the Chinook. It has a J13 in its mouth flopping around. I'm trying to hold it away from my leg so I don't get a hook in the crotch.
Oh my God.
Luckily, one of our friends was in a kayak just a few feet away, like maybe 50 feet away. He pedaled over and he grabbed the fish and helped us out. But it was very cold and we actually did go out again after that. But yeah, it was an experience.
Well, that same day we walked over to a sandbar that was there. We dumped out the canoe. We had all our rods propped up, against this big log that had drifted up onto it. Got ourselves, empty of water. We're still soaked to the bone, empty of water. And then we went right back out there and kept going.
Nice.
But we were wearing life jackets though. So that is one thing.
Yes.
There you go.
Yeah, where we always advocate for life
and we do not endorse fishing for salmon out of very unstable canoes, just so you know.
There are kayaks designed to do this. That we you just get the right.
How big was the canoe?
Never mind that. How big is the salmon?
It's a 16 foot.
16 foot?
Yeah.
16 foot. That salmon, I think, was about...
It wasn't a massive one.
Was it 20
it was just a normal size Chinook, but big enough to flip us over.
That same canoe, earlier that year, actually, I caught my personal best. It was the first salmon I ever caught out of that canoe. We were fishing that same harbor, and we had a 25-pound scale. And so I was lifting it up, and the scale maxed out before the back end of that salmon was out of the water.
Oh, nice!
So it was approaching at least 30 pounds.
Nice one.
But
out of a canoe.
I caught that out of a 16-foot canoe.
Yeah, that's
We never said we were smart.
Average. You said you were average.
Yeah. But we're learning, so maybe we've learned our lessons. Now, of course, we're in more stable craft.
Yeah.
All right. So this week I wanted to talk about something that it's been showing up a lot on my social media feeds, and it's something that is probably one of the most recognizable landmarks of North America, especially Canada, is Niagara Falls. Something that I know anyone that is listening to this podcast, even if you're not from, Niagara Falls for us is only like an hour and a half away. And for those, who are living further away, if you are out in Alberta or you're in Scotland, or if you're, down in the States somewhere, I'm pretty sure you've heard of Niagara Falls.
Isn't it like one of the 7 wonders of the world?
Yeah, I think so. It's pretty well
fair
known.
To say most people have heard of it. Yeah.
So some interesting facts about Niagara Falls is every second, 3,160 tons of water cross over the falls. It's when you combine all three, they form the second largest waterfall in the world, the largest being Victoria Falls. Now we have to split it a little bit. So my favorite part of Niagara Falls is the horseshoe because one, it's in Canada, and the other two sections of the falls is right on the border of America. So American has the American Falls and Bridal Veil Falls, which that accounts for 75,750 gallons per second. And the Horseshoe Falls have 681,750 gallons per second.
Wow.
So the Horseshoe Falls is the main body of water that's coming from the Niagara River and coming off. Now, the reason why I'm giving those facts is because it's important to understand how powerful Niagara Falls is, because as I mentioned before, I've been seeing on my social media feeds video of a deer being swept over the falls. I don't know if you've ever seen that before, Jesse. It's a deer swimming in the water and unfortunately drops off. That deer, from all the research I've seen, that didn't survive. I'm sorry. But it got me thinking of what other stuff has gone over the falls. First of all, I'm thinking, okay, it's water. Do fish go over the falls? Yes, it makes sense. Fish are going to go over. They're going to come from upstream, be swept down. Maybe they can't keep up with the current and they get swept over. Now, most of the time, they say that fish survive this fall with no issue. It's crazy, but they survive it. They're used to having lots of pressure, not like water pressure and stuff like that. They're used to that. If they get stunned, what happens is the birds below the falls will usually eat them as they float to the surface. So there are some fish casualties, but usually it's only because they're stunned. They don't die from the drop. They're just knocked out and then birds eat them. But some other things. So first of all, one fish that I'm not sure if the fish got injured, but someone did. There's a tourist going through the Cave of Winds, which is on the American Falls, and got hit by a salmon that fell down the falls.
What?
Can you imagine that? Just like, now we've had our ankles busted up by Chinook in the creek. I can't imagine having one drop down like 90 feet from above.
Yeah.
Just land on
that's
me.
crazy.
Thankfully, it kind of only grazed the guy. It wasn't actually a full contact dead center hit. That would have been a very different statistic if that was the case. But in 1901, there was Ligara, went over the falls as a test run in a barrel. Now, Ligara was a cat, poor cat. And again, like I said, that was a test run for Annie Taylor's barrel rides. And Annie Taylor became the first person to ever successfully survive going over the falls in a barrel. Another interesting person who went over the falls was October 22nd, 2003, Kirk Jones. Now, he was drinking with some friends and then had the genius idea of film me while I jump and start swimming over the falls, go over the falls, and then it'll all be on film. It'll be hilarious. Well, he jumped in the water, he swam, got swept over the falls, he went down, and he became the first person to survive going over the falls completely unaided. Not in a barrel, not in anything. Just a guy. And that was in 2003. He survived. However, his buddies were too drunk to work the camcorder, so there's no footage. He got fined $2,300 and was banned from Canada for life.
I was going to say when you said that, was he drunk? Because when someone gets drunk and they say if you fall from a high distance, your body just goes limp so you don't get hurt?
Yes.
That makes sense. He's drunk. He jumps off the falls and if you were completely sober and that happened, you're probably dead.
Yeah, the first person to survive an unaided, journey over the falls. Now, I do not advocate doing so. However, if you're going to do something stupid, do it drunk. That's the lesson learned.
I was going to say, if you've ever had to take a picture of someone's PB fish, their personal best size fish, and the picture doesn't turn out, you know how bad you feel? Like, it's never happened to me because I take amazing photos. But right. Imagine filming your buddy jumping over Niagara Falls to get banned for life and possibly dying, and you forgot how to turn on a camera because you're so hammered. What a chump. Another
awesome thing was, so this is another joint venture. So we talked about the cat, Ligara, and Annie Taylor. So they went separately. However, another man and an animal went over together in a barrel. So it was George and Sonny. Now, Sonny was a turtle, and they were sealed in an airtight barrel. This is on July 5th, 1930. They went over the falls and they both survived the drop. However, what often happens with these barrels is it'll get caught behind the falls. And unfortunately, that's what happened. So it was caught behind the falls for a few hours before they were able to get it retrieved. And they opened the barrel, and unfortunately, George had suffocated. On the bright side, Sonny survived. So the turtle was A-okay.
Why a turtle?
Yeah, I don't know. Now, I have one more thing that I had never heard of, and I don't know how I've never heard of this. This is one of the best stories I've ever heard come out of Canada as true events. It was actually the first tourism promotion ever held at Niagara Falls. This was in 1827. A group of hotel owners thought that, the falls, they're great and all, but we need a hook. Something that'll really bring the people in. So they cooked up this promotional event where they bought a condemned lake schooner, like a big boat called the Michigan. And then they printed up a bunch of pamphlets and handed them out all over in Canada and the States around the falls. The pamphlet read, "The pirate Michigan, with a cargo of ferocious wild animals, will pass the great rapids and falls of Niagara. 8th September 1827 at 6 o'clock. So, first of all, a little bit of information about this. The Merchant, the ship, it was used as the Michigan, it was used as a merchant ship on Lake Erie until it was condemned because it was an old ship. What they did was they kind of dressed the ship up like a pirate ship. They had some human dummies. They tied them to the deck so they'd be standing there. And then they filled the ship with some cargo. And they thought that if they sent it through the deep water of the river and it got through the rapids, they figured this will make it over the falls and be fine. Which, if you've ever seen the falls, I don't know how they ever thought that would work. They claimed to have on board young, especially strong panthers, wildcats, and wolves. And their reason for saying that they're young and especially strong is because they figured they'd be able to survive. Now, in reality, what you want to take a guess as to what they had on board, Jesse? Now, there is a variety of animals. I'll say that. But take a guess as to what you think they might be putting on board of this ship to send over the falls in the expectation that it should survive. I don't know how they thought that. What do you think's on board?
I think like farm animals, like cows.
That's a good thought. No, I don't know why. So they had a buffalo, 2 small bears, 2 raccoons, a dog, 15 geese, 2 foxes, and an eagle.
Ah, makes sense.
So their plan, which happened, they towed this boat full of these animals and these dummies on board and stuff like that. They towed it to Navy Island, upstream of the falls, and they let it loose. Now it got to the rapids, and the hull tore open, and the 2 bears actually escaped. They swam over to Goat Island. Now, the rest of the animals, I don't know why the bears weren't, but the rest were. The rest of the animals were tied or caged on this boat. But, the bears, let's just let them run into the wild. It made it over the falls, and unfortunately, 1 goose survived. That's it.
Wow.
Of all that stuff. And yeah, so that was the first tourism promotion ever held at the falls. And I don't know about you, but I would definitely watch that. No. Like, what? You know how in movies are always like, no animals are harmed in the making of this film? It's like, guess what? We harmed all the animals in the making of this hotel promotion.
Yeah, that wouldn't fly this time and age, would it?
That was the 1820s. What can you say?
Yeah.
So thankfully, I have no plans of going over the falls. I'm hoping no one else does because the statistics state that only about 25% of people who go over survive. Those aren't great odds.
All right, everyone, that's it for this episode. We really look forward to season 3 coming out in January. It's going to be an awesome year of awesome podcasts. Now, if you have any suggestions for segments that you'd like to see, please message us on Instagram or send us an email at averageontarioanglers@gmail.com. Have yourself a great rest of the year, and we'll see you in 2025.